people to get into the room.
Got it.
Hey, good afternoon, everyone. We'll just start in a minute. Ritesh, you can see my slide.
Yep.
Right?
Yep. I can see your screen.
Okay. Okay. Sorry, I'm in sunlight, so I have to a little bit awkward way to look at things.
No worries.
So I think we'll get started on this one. So good afternoon, everyone, for joining in. This is the next episode on webinar series on applied analytics. This is an initiative of the Informs Practice section. I'm Rajesh Tyagi. I'm one of the hosts for this webinar series. I've had a long association with the practice section and hope to continue in this particular capacity for a while. So before we hand over to our guest today, I want to spend a couple of minutes on the practice section. So the Informs Practice section, the purpose is to support the practice of analytics, management science, operations research, and really advanced analytics. So to that end, we support a number of activities. So we have the 3 annual competitions, the 3 major ones: the Franz Edelman Award, Daniel Wagner Prize, and the UPS George Smith Prize. Again, these are Informs level prizes which have been asked to be executed or run by the practice section. So this is a big honor for us. In addition to that, we also have some periodic hour series, which we typically try to hold every month or two. And of course, we have a monthly virtual networking happy hour. In fact, our guest today, Ritesh, is one of the hosts starting this year for this networking happy hour. We also have some section newsletters. And then, of course, we also have some conference events, the main one being that at the annual meeting, we hold about 12 sessions targeting practitioners in this field. So if you're interested in presenting your work, again, reach out to me or any of the practice section officers right on the top part there. If you're interested in joining this practice section just to volunteer or to participate in some of these activities, again, it's very easy to do. Go to the Informs Practice section. And typically, the membership fee is about $20 if you're already an Informs member, and only $30 if you are a non-member. And again, if you are, I would also suggest to you that you go to the website for these prizes. And, I would encourage you to apply if you think your organization would be interested in those competitions. Next, before I go to I saw the topic for our entity ledger accurate analytics by Ritesh Chok, who's the lead analytics engineer at finance and host data at A&B. I think my signal is getting a little bit weak and I don't have that right up, Ritesh. Can I just pass it on to you? And before I pass it on to Ritesh, one comment. Ritesh is going to present for about 40 minutes, and then he will answer your questions. We don't have the capacity to, everybody's muted right now. I don't have the capability to unmute everyone at the end of the presentation. So if you have any questions, just go to the Q&A box or the button, click on it anytime during the presentation and type in your question. And at the end, Ritesh will look through those questions and answer them. Ritesh, if I can ask you to give an introduction to yourself and start with the webinar, please.
Yep. Sure thing. So yeah, thanks Rajesh for having me. So currently I am a lead analytics engineer at Airbnb. I'm mainly responsible for building full stack analytic solutions in the form of data pipelines, semantic method layers, and to surface that in form of like beautiful dashboards to our end stakeholders. And currently the new OTR is also using AI agents to surface the same conversational level analytics. So I mainly work in the area of tax compliance and finance information. So the rigor of the data that is needed is extremely accurate. And a team is mainly responsible for having the reconciliation controls from upstream to downstream, and where we may want to make sure that the information that is passed over to the authorities, since Airbnb operates over 200 countries in the world, is absolutely accurate. So I've spent about 12 years building analytics solutions at various Fortune 500 companies. Prior to Airbnb, I was at Amazon, worked at Citigroup and WorldPay as well. Outside of work, I also spend a lot of time writing about and educating folks about how the field is transforming in the field of analytics, how to scale with AI in the field of analytics. I'm also a volume editor at the Informs tutorials, where we publish every year. We publish about 12 to 14 chapters related to the latest and greatest in the field of analytics and applied analytics. I'm also a member of the Informs Magazine Advisory Board, where we talk about or publish not research, but mainly articles which are related to how analytics is really transforming the industry and related to fields of applied analytics. I can also share at the end about my published works and the Association of Computer Machinery and CIO and the news stack as well. So that's a little bit about me. Rajesh, do you want me to continue with the presentation, or how do you want me to move forward? Rajesh, can you hear me? I am not sure if I hear you. Maybe I can start with presentation. Okay. In just the interest of time, let me start with my presentation. Okay. So today we're going to talk about from dashboards to decision building, AI-ready analytics on semantic layers and metric governance. So this is something that every organization is trying to scale in the field of AI, and surprisingly, what I found is it has nothing to do with the model. The models are getting smarter, the infrastructure is there. It is mainly has to do with the fundamental data layer, the schema and the data fabric the model is built on. So without further ado, let's get into it. I think we have already talked about my background, so I'm going to skip that for now. And let's talk about the burning platform and why this matters. So looks like currently we're living in a paradox where this large amount of spending is being done in the field of analytics. About $30 billion in 2025 and about $50 billion projected to be done by 2027 in global AI investment. This is as per Gartner and MIT Sloan and Deloitte State of the AI in 2025, where they did a survey that essentially, even though we have large amount of spending in the field of analytics, about 67% of leaders report low to moderate trust in AI-based decisions. And you might wonder, why is that so? So it doesn't seem to be a model problem, right? Because we have seen this space transforming so quickly and so rapidly. And then we have best-in-class infrastructure, best-in-class model trained on billions of parameters. It's actually related to what sits underneath them. And here's what makes this urgent right now is conversational AI means your C-level executives can directly query your information and natural language and get a confidently wrong answer in less than 3 seconds. So what used to require like an analyst to really expose, now it's instantaneous, right? The inconsistencies in the data they used to hide in weekly reports now can be surfaced instantly. So that makes like the data foundation more important than ever. You cannot have like disparate data. Every time you query or ask a question, you have to get a consistent answer. And considering it how easy it's become, having that solid data foundation is more important than ever. So moving on. So what is this analytics revolution, right, which we've seen over the course of the last 20, 30 years? So every era of analytics introduced a new capability and left a new weakness underneath. Let me see if I'm okay. Yes, so with SQL and Excel, something that we are most familiar with is obviously it required a trained analyst to service inconsistency. So the weakness actually stayed hidden. Moving on to cloud warehouses in the early 2010s, where we get scalable storage and centralized data, it introduced a problem called asymmetric sprawl, where the same KPI had a 10 different interpretations, 10 different definitions, not having consistent definition each time. So that resulted into different answers. So dashboard layer where they gave the visibility to business user, it created like a self-serve ecosystem where folks can go in and explore and create their own and find their own answers. But there was no clear way of defining maintainability and metric ownership. And lastly, now the conversational AI has eliminated the last buffer. The analyst or the human in the loop used to stand between the question and data, and the weakest link in your data is no longer internal. It is the answer your AI gives to your CEO. So since now non-technical stakeholders can directly query the data foundations, the weakest link is now exposed and visible to everyone. So like I mentioned earlier, your data foundation and having the kind of rigor in data foundation, investing in that is more important than ever right now for AI to scale. So based on my own experience and working through these organizations, I've identified 4 critical vulnerabilities or failure modes of AI and analytics, starting out with metric fragmentation. So the same business metric, 2 teams which are computing, you can say the revenue number with different interpretation, different logic. In their own ways, they can be valid, but from the organization's perspective, they are disparate, right? There's no single source of truth. Secondly, it is detached validation. Now, in most of the cases I've seen, reconciliation takes place after delivery and is not embedded within the data pipeline. And that creates a lot of problems, right? Because AI has already acted on bad numbers by the time anyone notices, and it gives you incorrect answers each time. Third is governance, having governance as an afterthought, right? So there are defined policies that exist in documentation, but they are not defined as a structural constraint. AI cannot really each time can read an updated like Confluence page and redefine this policy. It has to be embedded in every step of the process that you do. And fourth is I really want to emphasize on it is unvalidated user queries. A trained analyst knows when a number looks wrong. A business user cannot really discover that right away. And the problem with AI is delivers wrong answer with exactly the same confidence as the correct ones. So how do you really distinguish, right? So something, that comes to mind immediately is having a semantic layer. So for those of you familiar, like semantic layer is sort of like a translational layer between raw data and your business definition. So it's kind of like a way that it connects your schema definitions to what is defined by the business or the business metric. There are various tools in the industry that helps to create this semantic layer, or you can say de-normalized tables, which kind of define the relationship between your business metric and your downstream tables. But that's not it. Essentially, what we're looking at is that we have a definition overlay. We tell the BI what to query, where to get the information from, where the information lies, but they don't really enforce the truth. Metrics are defined, but nobody really owns them. Documentation exists, but there's no version control. And validation is manual and is more retrospective. It is built after the fact, it's not embedded within the pipeline. And I essentially call this as like a dictionary problem. You've named everything, you've governed everything, but you have not governed anything. AI-ready analytics requires solving constitutional problem, which needs to be more structural, not just documentation. So how do we really solve for this? What does the ideal state really look like? So I've, based on my own experience, I've created something called like a governance gap framework, which is kind of a set of like 5 pillars to build a trustworthy analytics foundation. Starting out with like semantic definitions. So obviously that is like being fundamental. It is built on your semantic layer. You need to have a single source of truth, exactly one definition per metric. And that is kind of stored as a code. It does not live in your wiki pages, does not live within your Google Docs. It is defined in code. Secondly is Git computation. So what this means is all logic is version control. There are no single mutations. Every change is tracked in a commit. And I've seen like many teams like ignoring this step, and this is probably one of the most like skipped components, and that leads to a lot of most of failures in terms of AI trust. And third being ownership. Now, owners being accountable for accuracy and downstream use. Um, and it's not just defined once, like in the beginning of the year, and it falters throughout the course of the year. It is really embedded. Now, structural ownership is embedded in definition and with clearly defined transfer protocols. So if one team dissolves, or probably someone moves out, or there's an ownership transfer, there is a clearly defined protocols to do that, so that at the end of the day, like reporting that is powered on that set of metrics, they stay intact. Fourth is lineage and metadata. Now, full traceability from raw source to final output. This is your regulatory evidence, programmatic, not manual. So this is we're going to help you, especially if you work in finance and regulatory environments. Going to establish that full paper trail that you can share with authorities, as well as for your internal and external audit. So that's where it's very important to maintain that kind of lineage and upstream and downstream traceability. And 5 being AI enablement. Oh, let's see, we have a question. All right. And 5 being AI enablement. So definitely need stable AI APIs for AI and conversational interfaces. So what this means is like AI never hits your raw or unversioned tables. It's always and always hitting your controlled and maintained tables, and it knows where the lineage gap really exists or where the assumptions are. So essentially what this means is that we have raw data at the bottom, we have AI interfaces on the top, and we have governance at every step on the way. And this governance gap framework can help you get to that step. All right, moving on. So one area that probably every one of us has experienced as we started working on these AI tools is hallucination, right? But in the AI or analytics level context, right, hallucination is kind of misunderstood. When AI gives the wrong answer, people blame the model. But in analytics context, hallucination is almost never a reasoning failure. Model is doing exactly what it's supposed to do. It is just taking a bunch of inputs, computing it, producing an output. The failure is those inputs were inconsistent or untraced. The business user risk here is definitely real. A trained analyst does have the domain expertise to look at the numbers, go back to the logic, and say something feels off. The business user may not have that kind of instinct. So the errors that propagate into decisions based on this incorrect interpretation or wrong data before any analytical expertise sees them, the fix is not better prompting. The fix is structure validation, which is embedded in the pipeline, as we revisited earlier, and it's not layered on top. And if you're working in finance, I mean, we need to strive for something 99.99% accuracy, right? Which is like absolute traceability from upstream to downstream. You have your definition, which are version controls are immutable. Finance doesn't like data which is changing quarter over quarter or year over year. Moving on to the next quarter, you're not supposed to, like the previous year's quarters, they don't supposed to change, and everything has to be recorded in form of snapshot. Um, so what I can say is like there needs to be like a solid three-layer check. Does the output really match the version metric definition? Can it be traced back to the source? And does it fall within the variance threshold against the authoritative ledger? And everything has to be automated and minimizing any kind of manual steps. So touching upon the basic theory, as we went over right now, what can be a practical framework for establishing an AI-ready analytics? Um, so the first and foremost thing that you need to do is identify the top 20 business metrics for that define your business health. And you know, I've seen like most of the teams jump to like the four-step enable, deploy AI interfaces, and even if your data foundation is not completely well established, just expose them to the end user and create like disparate and get disparate kind of results. So that's the reason it's very, very important to spend the time and documenting these definitions as code and really defining a single source of truth for each of these business metrics, right? No matter like what geographical region the team sits in or what tool they're using, if the data foundation is correct, they'll get the same exact result, and your financial statements will speak to your data information, and the trust will be established within teams as well as scaling up all the way to the C-level executives. The second thing is after you define your top 20 business metrics, the second thing is building. So you need to have that 5-level component architecture of the governance gap framework that we discussed earlier, starting out with your semantic layers, right? And then you have governance baked in every step of the way. Everything is version controlled, right? Tracked with with a proper Git commit. And thirdly is reconciling. So like we talked about validation, right? So validation is never supposed to be an afterthought. It has to be baked into your data pipeline and in every step of the way. These validation checks needs to be automated, right? Every time you see a validation check failing, you should get an alert. And essentially, it's better to like have the entire pipeline fail than resurfacing or surfacing incorrect data to your end stakeholders. Then kind of gets back to you and saying that why these numbers don't quite match. And the fourth is, after you have these first 3 steps defined, that is the time you go and you deploy your AI interfaces. You expose only your governed metrics, monitor AI query patterns, and continuously validate the trust. So what this means is governance is not a gate before AI project. It is the core foundation the AI project is built on. So based on our discussion, I would like to leave you with a few key takeaways. As we talked about, for AI to really scale and be successful in an enterprise and lead to high level adoption and trust, it is fundamentally a data problem. It is not a model problem. It is not an infrastructure problem. That is secondary. So the most important thing is having a solid data foundation layer that regardless of whatever model is selected or whatever infrastructure you have in the background, it gives you a consistent result and leads to higher scalability and adoption. 2 is the root cause of failure is absent ownership and validation, not model quality. And semantic overlays are useful but not sufficient. And the governance is structural. And essentially, so this is mainly a developing field, right? We know whatever we know right now, it can change 6 months down the line with how the field is progressing, especially like how models are being developed. And then with what we saw with the launch of Mythos, right? It's kind of, it has the capability to transform the entire compliance industry. So, but one thing is for sure that if you have the right kind of foundation set up with respect to your data, no matter what tool you're using, or what infrastructure you're using, you're going to get the right result. And that is the thing that we want to get. I want to emphasize on is how to start stress with the data is with this core governance gap framework. If you're interested in some of the stuff that I published, I'll more than happy to share this with you all about I've written about governance gap, about why enterprise breaks without metric discipline and what is needed over there, and also as well as like various research is being conducted in this area, especially with large language models, as well as with different surveys which is related to like what CEOs are really feeling about AI scaling as well. So with that, I'm going to hand it over to Rajesh, and I'll share my LinkedIn if folks would like to connect. And we, as Rajesh pointed out, we also have a virtual happy hour at the end of every month. I believe it's at the end of every Friday on 5 p.m. EST time. So I'll share the link for folks to sign up for it. So with that, I'll open it up for question answers.
Thanks, Ritesh. If you can check the Q&A, there is one question there, I think. And again, folks, if you have any questions, please type in the Q&A box. Ritesh, if you can just speak out the answers.
Yeah, sure.
And I guess speak out the question also, if you would, please.
Okay, sure thing. So there's a question by Zohar. So how do you enforce structure governance? Is this something, is it about using specific tool, or is it about regenerating results until they match the govern core? So what this really ties back to the 5 layered architecture that I talked about. Is governance is not supposed to be an afterthought. It needs to be embedded in every step of the way, right from your core data tables to defining data definitions, to creating semantic layers, to creating the validation framework, to finally deploying that in production with AI. So that's how I think about structural governance. And one thing that obviously that cannot be ignored is ownership, right? Every team needs to have defined ownership in terms of what metrics they create, how they really maintain it, and to make sure that we also, as AI agents are trained on top of this layer, you get consistent results each time. All right, second question. So what is the role of traditional BI, Tableau, Power BI play in the semantic layer now with the adoption of AI? That's a great question. So the traditional BI is also transforming. Now I've seen users, instead of like, so earlier, obviously, we used to have, you have your SQL queries, you surface that in form of like a spreadsheet or, a beautiful dashboard. Now folks are going for more conversational level interaction with the AI. So instead of like clicking around the dashboard to really find like what changed month over month, year over year for revenue, let's say in the US versus Europe for a certain product, folks are interacting with more in a natural language format. So I would imagine in the next like few months or maybe 6 months or maybe a year, there will be more AI agents which are sitting on top of these dashboards. Where sometimes I can also feel that dashboards don't even exist, right? You can just chat with like your AI agent and continuously keep on asking questions. And if they want to spin up a dashboard, it can also spin up a dashboard for you. So that's what I see. Okay, the next question. What would happen if the AI program asked the question of multiple sets of sources and then reported a range of outcomes? The results differ. The user could then decide how to proceed. Multiple sets of sources and then reported a range of outcomes. So in that case, like we don't want to confuse the user. And I've seen that in the organization multiple times that, if the financial numbers are not matching what is reported in some of the internal reports versus what is being done internally within your teams, it creates a lot of chaos and confusion. And idea is to dive deep into the logic and understand, hey, what kind of assumptions teams are using to get that output. So the idea is always to have like a single source of truth. That's where everything can be traced back to. And then you can get consistent answer.
All right. Thanks. Thanks, Ritesh. So I think those are all the questions that we have. Again, I want to remind folks that I think in about a few days' time, the webinar is going to be posted on the practice section website. And if you have any suggestion for a speaker, or you would like to present yourself, just reach out to me. My email address is on the slide. And if there are no more questions, so I just want to thank you, Ritesh, for taking time talk to us about this important topic. And so we'll stop here again. So see you next time, folks. Thank you again.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone. Thanks, Rajesh, for having me.